New impetus. On this morning's show, we'll be taking a look at one of the most enduring issues in US politics, healthcare, or more specifically, who should pay when someone gets sick. Coronavirus is starting to have an effect here too. Overnight, Florida has declared a state of emergency after a spike in cases, while firefighters have been quarantined in Washington state after 6 deaths there. In the UK, cancelling of major gatherings and reports also of infected areas, no-go zones, just some of the emergency measures the government could be bringing in to help fight the spread of coronavirus. Boris Johnson has set out his government's plan this morning. Enda Brady reports.
As coronavirus threatens to take hold, the government is taking action. The Prime Minister's battle plan includes a major information campaign so the public
For you throughout the course of the programme, including from the Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who joins us at 8 o'clock your time, midnight our time here in Vegas. Before that, though, we'll get an update from the World Health Organization, who say the world is in uncharted territory when it comes to the virus outbreak. We'll also hear from the Centre for Economic and Business Research, who are warning that a lockdown in the UK could wipe more than £10 billion off the economy. That's at 7:30. Now, a few days ago, his campaign to be president looked down and out, but his landslide win in South Carolina appears to have triggered an astonishing comeback for Joe Biden in the race to take on Donald Trump in November. Overnight, the former US vice president was endorsed by 2 of his former earlier opponents for the nomination. That was Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. In a moment, we're going to be getting the thoughts of our panel of Las Vegas locals, Larry, Steve and Yolani. But first, Sky's Amanda Walker reports on how moderate Democrats are helping Joe Biden build some much-needed momentum before he takes on Bernie Sanders on Super Tuesday. Much closer to finding Democrat candidates. We've got quite a panel for you, including Tina Turner. Not quite, but impersonator Larry Edwards is here, also known on stage as Hot Chocolate. Candidates. We've got quite a panel for you, including Tina Turner. Not quite, but we've got quite a panel for you, including thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for coming in your fantastic outfit. You were supporting Pete, weren't you?
Yes.
Where does that leave you?
Well, now I'm going to go with Joe because he just endorsed Joe tonight, Joe Biden. So I'm really looking forward to supporting him now. But, I was hoping Pete would have won.
Yeah, I think we probably know a bit of an idea as to why you support Pete. He was the first openly gay candidate, wasn't he? But he didn't get the support that he wanted.
No, he didn't get the minority folks, for anybody. So
why do you think that was? To you in just a second. Why do you think that was?
I think because he didn't really hit to South Carolina beforehand, before he got there. I think he should have pushed more of the issues with the Afro-Americans and also Hispanics, but it just, I guess he didn't do his homework with that as much.
Maybe next time.
Next time, but he was
Steve,
amazing.
I've spoken to you quite recently.
Yeah.
You're a Brit abroad.
Yes, I am, indeed.
We want to talk about healthcare, amongst other things, today.
Absolutely.
You've had experience both sides of the Atlantic with that, haven't you? What's it like here?
Well, being a British person in the US, it's strange, first of all, coming across having to pay insurance, co-pays and other fees on top. For example, an average family of 4 will pay up to $1,200 a month for insurance to cover for their family. In the UK, you don't pay that whatsoever. So it's a significant cost for people that perhaps the UK aren't aware of. And then obviously for the Americans, they're perhaps not aware of the fact that we have the NHS, but we also have private options as well, such as Bupa, that if they choose to go for a more perhaps seen as premium route with their healthcare, there's that option too. So, I'm a Bernie supporter, although I do agree with sort of Pete's idea of having sort of the 2 options there. And I think really with Bernie, he's there to move the needle a little bit, make people aware of the options that healthcare are around.
Okay, I want to ask you about your experience with healthcare in just a second, but first to you. And you're tasked with a root and branch look at healthcare, aren't you? And the impact that it has here in Nevada. Where do you start with that?
Well, my personal experience being a registered nurse, seeing patients that come in with no insurance. I am a labor and delivery nurse, so I see a lot of moms that come in with no prenatal care, with babies that have issues because they didn't get the care that they needed. I personally support healthcare for all. I think this is a step that the country needs to make eventually.
So what sort of challenges do those mums have that you're talking about? They come in with babies who are poorly. They don't necessarily have the money in order to pay for healthcare. What do you do?
One of the laws here in the U.S. is once a patient comes into the hospital, they cannot be denied the care, but they come in as an emergency, so they can get the care that they need immediately, but not the prenatal care. Things that could be prevented cannot be done. So people are stuck deciding on if they pay rent, they pay food, education, or they get the prenatal care or health care that they need.
I saw a lady on one of the walkways here actually earlier on today, and she said that cancer had broken her. She had paid for her cancer care and she had no money left. She had no job, she had no money left at all. It was heartbreaking to see. You've had experience in the healthcare system, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to be a snowboarder here when I first moved to America.
In the desert. It wasn't
Well,
in the desert,
I lived in
was it?
Colorado
Yeah,
before this.
yeah.
But yeah, I had a stage 4 concussion, which, you know, something in England you get taken to the hospital, looked after, no problem, you're home. But I got lifted off the mountain. Multiple ambulances, MRIs, and the total cost of that was around $14,000.
Wow.
You know, I also broke my knee, and the surgery that would have cost that would have been close to $30,000. Luckily, thankfully, for the insurance company I had in the UK, flew me back. They didn't have to cover for it because I went straight to the NHS, and I actually saw an England rugby doctor, so I got great care in the UK too. But you know, for most snowboarders, and at the time, that would break their career. There's no way they can afford to look after themselves.
Yeah.
You know, as an independent athlete, you can't fund yourself an insurance premium. You know, that costs $1,000 a month.
Wow. Yeah. Laurie, it's very important to you as well, Medicare, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if you're aware of the system in the United Kingdom. It's free at the point of care, cradle to grave. If you need support, if you need the health care in the United Kingdom, you get it. It's a big issue here as well, of course, with coronavirus at the moment, because we don't know how that's going to develop. What do you think?
Exactly. I actually just turned 65, so when you turn 65, you get Medicare automatically. So I was just really happy with now they're going to try to at least everyone either get it or have the option. So if you don't want it, you don't have to have it, but at least have that option at all ages, not just 65 like I just turned. So.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. You've had already the vote here in Nevada, haven't you?
Yeah, the
caucus. Yeah. But it's Super Tuesday later on today. We're going to have a clearer idea. I mean, it looks as though you're all more or less supporting the same candidate. We'll have a clearer idea later on today who that might be. How disappointed were you that Pete pulled out?
I was supporting Bernie, but obviously him going into the Super Tuesday, and all the other candidates that dropped out are circling around Biden now.
Yeah.
So I think, unfortunately for Bernie, I think it's going to be, when he gets to super delegates, it's going to be taken away from him again. My concern there is then you'll have 2 rounds of Bernie voters over the last 2 elections that perhaps might feel dismayed at the process, and that perhaps they might not turn out. So there's a concern there that maybe Trump gets back in because you don't have the Bernie votes.
Yeah. Who do you think would best, which candidate at this stage would best support what you're looking for as far as healthcare in this country is concerned?
I believe that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie have similar ideas on healthcare, and so I haven't decided which one I want to support yet.
Okay.
Because they are very similar.
Okay.
I do think we're getting closer to having or being ready to have a woman president. I think it would be a big step for this country.
Yeah, not ready for an openly gay president, but potentially a woman president at this stage. I'm going to leave it there for now, guys. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so
very
much.
much indeed. Thanks a lot. So those are the thoughts from some of the people here who live. Good morning, everybody. 7:30, Tuesday, 3rd of March. Welcome back to Burly Live at The Las Vegas sign for you this morning. Vegas, as we prepare our map right across the United States, well, certainly the West Coast. 4 states in 4 days. We're trying to find out on Super Tuesday who it is who could evict the president in November. Bernie Sanders won big when Nevada voted last week, but it's Joe Biden who's claiming all the Joe-mentum. See what we did there? After 2 of his former opponents endorsed him to be the nominee. More on that in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about the coronavirus in more detail. COVID-19. Florida has declared a state of emergency after a spike in cases, while firefighters have been quarantined in Washington state after 6 deaths there. In the United Kingdom, cancelling large gatherings, deterring people from travelling, and reports of making infected areas no-go zones are just some of the emergency measures that the government could be bringing in to help fight the spread of the coronavirus. Let's talk about it, as I said, in more detail. And joining us from the spokesperson for the World Health Organization is Tarek Yazarovich, and he joins us live. Hello to you, sir. Thank you.
Of the
businesses around in years gone by, it's been a race dominated by one issue: healthcare. All the time that he is appearing on the states will be voting
the virus.
Okay, Douglas McWilliams, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Live in Las Vegas for you today. 4 states in 4 days. This is day 2, so state 2, Super Tuesday. 14 states will be voting today. The front runner at this stage is still Bernie Sanders, but we know that Joe Biden has got the endorsement of 2 of the candidates who have dropped out over the last few hours. What difference will that make for him in Super Tuesday? Also, of course, one of the candidates, it's the first time that he is appearing on the ballot paper. More on that to come. We're hours away from one of the biggest days in the race to the White House. And as I was saying, for many Democrats, just as it has been in years gone by, it's been a race dominated by one issue: healthcare, or perhaps who should pay for healthcare. Some Democrats favour shifting to the government-run system that we see here that's been promoted by Bernie Sanders, while others worry such a radical overhaul of the healthcare system could frighten off undecided voters, crucial to winning November's election. Greg Milam explains what's at stake.
If it feels like every American election ends up being dominated by healthcare, it's not surprising. It's a problem, it seems.
Joined by Megan Mesley, who's a reporter for the Nevada Independent. Hello to you, Megan. Bernie Sanders we're hearing about there and his plans for healthcare. He did very well here, didn't he, in the caucus?
He did, yeah. He had an excellent organization here on the ground. In a caucus, you have to get bodies out to the polls to vote. It's kind of a complicated process. So he had more than 250 staffers on the ground by the time the caucus rolled around. That was more than double the size of any other campaign. So he really had the infrastructure here that he needed. On top of that, we know that Bernie Sanders does really well with voters of color here. They like him, they like his message, and that really resonated with them.
Super Tuesday tonight, or today, voting throughout the day today, hugely important for the 3-4 main Democrats left in the race.
It is. An important thing to note is that very few states have voted at this point, right? Only 4 states have actually participated. Here's where we actually get the first real sense of how these candidates fare nationwide. This is the closest thing that we have to a sort of nationwide primary, given that our states do vote sort of one by one sequentially. This will be a really important test for Bernie Sanders and how his message appeals, but also for Joe Biden and whether he can sort of have that comeback. He's had recent endorsements today that will give him a boost, and he's seeking to position himself as the alternative to Bernie Sanders.
And Bloomberg, first time he's been on the ballot.
It is, yeah. Mike Bloomberg did not play in Nevada. Some of his ads sort of spilled over, so I actually talked to voters who wanted to caucus for him and couldn't because he was not on the ballot here. So this is really the first test of him and his organization and the hundreds of millions of dollars that he has spent trying to get his name out there. And he has really positioned himself as an alternative to Joe Biden. But with this sudden surge of Joe Biden's excellent performance in South Carolina, it's going to be interesting to see how he actually does come Super Tuesday.
By the end of the day, will we know who's going to be the Democrat candidate?
I wouldn't go quite so far as to say that. It's still a very influx race. I think if you see one candidate, if Bernie runs away with all the states and if Joe Biden runs away with all the states, you might see some talk of that, but I would imagine it's going to be a lot closer than that.
It's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for standing out in the cold for us.
No worries, thank you.
It's always as cold in Nevada.
Yes, in the winter, yes.
It's good to talk to you. Thanks very much. Coming up in just a few moments' time, we're going to be taking a look below the surface of Las Vegas. Literally, we'll learn more about those living in the storm drains of the city of sin. Now it's living in fear of being washed away.
Viva Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. Bright lights, shows, gambling high rollers being flown in on private jets owned by the casinos. More than 40 million visitors a year flock to this desert oasis, hoping to find entertainment, fun, and Lady Luck shining down on them. But Vegas is a tale of two cities. While many people leave here with memories of having a fantastic time, just a few meters below the Vegas Strip are these storm drains. This is where the rains come from the desert. 1,100 people live in these tunnels underneath the city. They also came hoping for a better life, but just ran out of road. There's a dangerous subterranean existence fueled by drugs. Luck has deserted them. Instead, they dumpster dive for items to sell and feed their habit. Hiding in the darkness just beneath the well-heeled shoes of the Vegas visitors is Michael. He's a heroin addict who's buried his partner and turned his back on his young son for a life in the darkness. He told me what it was like to live in the tunnels when the rains come. Can you tell us what happens when the rains come?
We get a little warning. You know, a lot of people follow the weather, and then once it starts raining, everybody's scrambling with their stuff, what they want to get out of here. And then soon there'll be you can hear it coming. It's like it's an eerie, scary sound, and it's just like a freight train coming through, and it's like a wall of water. And it will, all this pretty much would be filled, you know, like you said, Whitewater Rapids. If you don't make it out, you're probably going to die. Because it's not the water that kills you, it's the debris and the stuff that comes with the water.
Beverly came to Vegas from Alabama. She's a grandmother. Her family don't know how she lives. What do you say to them when you speak to them?
That I'm doing fine. And, I got a place. I'll be coming home to visit, coming to visit soon. Which I will. I've got a grandson I've got to go meet.
How old is he?
He just turned a year old.
Oh, is he walking?
Yes. I've met him through video chat. We do a lot of video chat. He's gorgeous. I didn't know baby could be so cute.
Will they ever be able to see the light? The answer is potentially in the form of our next guest, Rob Bankhart. He used to live in the tunnels that run below us here. I was asking at the end of that report, Rob, whether people could ever see the light, and the answer is yes, because you have a charity called Shine a Light, don't you? How many of them take up the opportunity?
As we grow, the number obviously grows. Last year we had 35 people came out of the tunnels. This year we're on pace to break that number, so as we grow, obviously more people we can reach out to.
Why won't they come out? Because you're there and you say, we will offer you support.
I mean, a lot of these people, it took a long time to get to a place where they're living in a tunnel. So it takes a long time to build that relationship and that trust because they've lost faith, you know what I mean? They've lost all that hope. So it's not something where they're just going to believe anybody, you know what I mean? You got to build a relationship with them like anything else.
You were in the tunnels.
Yes, ma'am.
What made you, what gave you that hope to come out?
Simple acts of kindness, you know what I mean? People surrounded me. I was in a hospital, they came to me and said, listen, you don't have to go back to that, you know what I mean? We know a way out. And it was just very soft, gentle, caring, you know what I mean? It was just, I believed them, you know what I mean? But it took a little while.
I'm sure it did. Michael and Beverly featured in our report there. They've lived in the tunnels for a while.
Oh yeah, very long time.
Yeah. Michael's health is failing.
Yep.
He did come out,
Yeah.
then he buried his partner, and he's gone back in again.
Correct.
Do you think that you'll ever be able to convince him?
All I can do is hope, you know what I mean? Keep showing up. That's, you know what I mean? They have to each hit their own bottom to be willing to accept help. And I don't know where that is, you know what I mean? I only know where mine was. Everybody has a different one, so.
How do they cope? I mean, it's freezing tonight. How do they cope in the tunnels when the weather's like this?
They've been out there for a while. They know what they're doing, you know what I mean? They know they've got everything they need to stay warm for sure.
When you say that, you go down, don't you, and you take blankets and you take sanitary products and you try and help them as best you can. They almost create a little, as if, you know, the homeless people that are there create a community for themselves, but I'm guessing it's very dangerous as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's why they're in the community most of the time, is because the more people, the more eyes, you know what I mean, the more people to watch out for each other.
Indeed. 1,100 or thereabouts in the tunnel. Who do you think could possibly, of all of the candidates in the Democratic race, maybe help them?
I don't know. I'm not really big into politics. So
yeah, I don't really want to get into the politics of it, but they certainly need someone to help them.
Of course. I mean, we judge a society by how it treats its poorest, right? And these guys are living underground next to billion-dollar buildings, you know what I mean? So obviously there's an answer there somewhere. But for right now, all I do is focus on what I can do, you know, my part, and hopefully.
Let's hope so. Rob, it's good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Kate Burly on tour in Las Vegas. We'll see you in just a moment. Stay tuned. Want to be the Democratic candidate, joined by radio presenter Sean Tempesta, business owner Susan Profit, and also a restaurant manager Joshua Lally. Hello to you all. Thank you so much for joining us. It's very chilly. Thank you for standing out in the cold and the dark. Good to see you. Sean, let's start with you. What do your listeners tell you?
Well, I mean, listeners, there's a lot of confusion out there. I mean, the Democratic Party right now is kind of fractured. Here in Nevada, we had Bernie Sanders win, but around the country,
that was for the caucus
for the caucus,
week,
yes.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting time right now. It just seems like there's, in years past and elections past, it seems like there was a more clear front runner, and right now I think it's a total toss-up.
Yeah, Susan, you think that Bernie Sanders is a communist?
Yes, I do, actually. There's very little difference between communism and socialism. The only difference is that you get to vote for socialism, and communists are forced to do it.
Okay.
And
so
I don't believe in socialism. I don't believe in socialism.
Okay,
I don't.
How does that make Bernie a communist?
Because he is a communist.
Okay, but you can vote for him.
No, I can't.
No, but one can vote for him.
Yes, they can vote for him if they want that.
Okay, so that makes him a socialist. I'm guessing. I don't know. What's your view?
On Bernie Sanders or on socialism and communism?
Well, where should we start? Let's start with Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders, I initially supported him in 2016, and then I switched over to Hillary early. I think he's a noble person who has got his ideals. I don't agree with everything he says or everything he believes, but I think that his heart's in the right place, and I think he's personally a little bit overstretched, which is why I didn't support him in the primary. But if he gets the nomination, I'll support him in the general.
Who do you think is the biggest threat to President Trump, Susan?
No one.
Why do you say that?
Because he's unbeatable. 18 pages. Accomplishments. He's the party of results.
Okay, what's the top of the list for you?
Not resistance. His top of the list? Well, you know, from a personal standpoint, I have to say that trade is going to make the biggest difference for our country. It's making a difference right here in Nevada. I know you were interested to know what we thought in Nevada, not just the United States.
Indeed.
And we have 120,000 new jobs in Nevada alone. We've got 7 million in the whole United States. And the most significant part of that, to me, is that 16,000 of those jobs are manufacturing, because that brings jobs to the state, and that brings growth to the state, and that's what he's about. I can't imagine him losing when he has accomplished so much in such a short amount of time.
The one thing with manufacturing jobs, while manufacturing has increased here, our output's been through the roof. The number of manufacturing jobs as a whole has actually gone down about a third because of robotics, because of automation. So a lot of these jobs are being taken away not by this boogeyman across the way, although China is a serious issue. It's being taken over by robotics. Andrew Yang, to a certain extent, it was the one person really speaking truth to power when it comes to stuff like this. The fact that really our biggest enemy is essentially the robots that we're creating to take over the jobs, and what happens if there's not enough jobs for the amount of people in the country.
And Joshua, you should actually have been going back to China, shouldn't you? But yeah. you came over to vote. Should have
No,
been.
I came over for a holiday.
For a holiday.
And then
you should have been going back,
while
but
I got
you can't.
Here, got
Tell
stuck
us
with
why.
the virus, yeah. So yeah, I planned to come over here at the beginning of February, and then the virus hit, and so I made plans to come back earlier. And then I've just been stuck here because it's not safe to travel. I did the proper quarantine, and then just stuck around and waiting to see what happens. But being from China, being from Beijing, the streets are empty, the economy is at a halt, and the fear with it spreading to the U.S., spreading to the world, is that we're going to face that all over the world.
Is that a concern for you as well, given that the economy could be hit by what's happening as far as the coronavirus is concerned? We saw what happened with the Dow Jones at the end of last week. It took a big hit, the lowest it's closed since 2008, but it bounced back yesterday.
Yes, it did. And you know, well, you see those kind of patterns in our stock market all the time. You know, they drop on Thursday and Friday, and they bounce back a bit on Monday. And that was very promising. I was happy to see that. I think that this virus, though, it actually shines a light on one of the reasons why we really need to consider what we're having manufactured in this country and not. I think it's really important that our supply chain stays consistent, and that's where you're going to see you know, a lot of our companies being hurt because they can't get the supplies that they need to make their sales. Yeah.
We have a lot of eggs in that basket, and to not be able to have full contact with the goods to be able to bring here causes a significant issue. And the other thing with coronavirus here, I mean, there's really nothing special about America in the sense that there's nothing that would stop it from taking over this country as well. And ultimately, with the healthcare system that we have here, a lot of people wait until the last possible second if they don't have proper insurance to get the care they need. By that point, it might be too late. They might have been meeting people and kind of spreading it another way, which gets us on a whole healthcare conversation. But yeah, it's just it's a scary time right now. I'm not sure how it's going to proceed.
Okay, how do you see your healthcare system progressing here in the United States?
Well, I hope it progresses because I'm like the poster child for everything that went wrong. I was a small business owner. I dealt with countries like China, Italy, France, all over the world. I couldn't believe that they actually lied to us. I was so disappointed in Obama when he lied to us to get this medical program passed. And they did. They lied to us. And I've been canceled 5 times since that happened. I had to let go people in my business. My clients had to let people go in their businesses because they couldn't afford to pay all of the medical coverage increases that happened as a result of how they implemented it. I mean, one of the backroom deals that President Obama cut with the insurance companies was that all of a sudden now we can lose our insurance. Before, if you're paying into the insurance company, you could keep your insurance as long as you were paying on time. No, that's not the case. Now, as soon as they had Obamacare, they took it away from us. And every time they canceled it, they double the price on me.
Okay.
And now...
Okay, Joshua, your thoughts on that?
So, been watching a lot of the news specifically surrounding the virus, and one of the things that comes out constantly is that we're only as well protected as our least covered person. And my friend who moved out of China went to Taiwan. Taiwan has a social healthcare system. And when he got back, he went to the hospital, got tested, had to stay for 4 nights in quarantine, and he left the hospital with a bill for $15 for his meal. And then they apologized and paid for the meal subsequently. And the number of breakouts and number of cases in Taiwan are minimal. And it's right next to China, and arguably a part of China if you talk to the Chinese politicians. But the case being that social health care prevents the spread of virus or minimizes it. And that's a danger here because if I'm not covered or somebody else isn't covered, there's a good chance they're not going to go to the hospital.
Okay. Final thought from you, Sean?
I totally agree with that. I think ultimately our healthcare system is pretty fractured. What she was mentioning with Obamacare started as a Romney Care, is what they would call it in Massachusetts. That was essentially the same plan that they put upon the country, but it forces you in a relationship with a for-profit insurer, which is incredibly expensive. And I think a lot of people feel the pinch. Almost 60% of all the bankruptcies in America are healthcare related, and that's obscene. So I think we're all in agreement. We could do better than this, and there is a lot better than this in other countries in the world, and we should look at those as a model to be able to base us on.
Sadly, we're out of time, guys. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Very much indeed. Thank you. Thanks a lot. You're watching Kay Burly at breakfast. Freezing cold. We're all freezing. What about where you are? Let's find out. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to a special edition of Kay Burly at Breakfast. We are live this morning from Las Vegas, a city famous for bright lights and the promise of a good time. But lying below Sin City Strip is a secret. Thousands of America's down and outs living in fear of being washed away. At Breakfast, we are live this morning from Las Vegas, a city famous for bright lights and the Las Vegas sign, and in addition to that, joined from Reno by Amy Tarkanian, who is a former Nevada State GOP chairwoman. GOP standing for Grand Old Party, in other words, a Republican strategist. Hello to you both. Thank you for joining us. Nice to see you. It's very cold here in Vegas. It's going to be pretty cold in those tunnels below. Who do you think would best look after the people there?
Well, clearly I think Democrats would do the best to address an affordable housing crisis we see in the United States, both in Las Vegas and around the country. I have not picked a candidate on the Democratic side, but I definitely believe that the Democratic Party is the party that represents the working families and the working poor, and has solutions to make sure that the economy starts working for everybody again.
And who do you think would be the best candidate to take on Donald Trump at this stage?
Well, if the current choices are what we're seeing, obviously we saw a few people drop out today and yesterday. I probably would be on the more pragmatic side with Vice President Biden over Bernie Sanders.
Let's bring in Amy, should we, who's joining us from Reno. Hello to you, Amy. Who do you think that President Trump and his campaign would be most concerned about?
I think that any of the remaining are going to be, I don't want to say a cakewalk to take on, because you never want to be too overly confident. You always want to act like you're 10 steps behind, 10 points behind. But they all have their faults. And when you have this economy that's booming, and when you have wages that are growing, and you have unemployment numbers that are at low records, lowest that they've been for decades, it's a very hard message for Democrats to combat.
Well, let's see. Megan, how would you respond?
Well, it's clear that the economy is working for the 1% and not for everybody. Wage growth has been stagnant for years. And again, as you saw firsthand down in the tunnels, we have an affordable housing issue. We have people working 2 and 3 jobs making the same amount they made pre-recession. And I do think that healthcare costs are rising.
I just lost Kay Burly there, unfortunately, in Las Vegas. Other news to come in the next few hours. Shame to lose Kay just at the end of our program there, but we might get her back. We are focusing this morning here on the coronavirus, of course. 39 people in the UK